Welcome to Eternal Love Diaries, where real stories change real lives. Every love carries a story. And here, each one is told from the heart. Today's story follows James, a 38-year-old successful architect who's buried himself in work since his divorce 3 years ago. When his cousin's wedding invitation arrives demanding he bring the wife his family doesn't know he's divorced, panic sets in. In desperation, he asks his efficient but reserved assistant Olivia to pose as his wife for the weekend. What begins as an awkward business arrangement quickly becomes complicated as they navigate family dynamics, unexpected chemistry, and the web of lies they've created. As the charade continues, both James and Olivia must confront uncomfortable truths about themselves and what they truly want from life. What happens when pretending feels more authentic than reality? And how do you admit feelings that were never supposed to exist? I can't believe I'm asking you this. James paced his corner office, running his hand through his salt and pepper hair for the 5th time in as many minutes. The wedding invitation lay on his desk like a ticking bomb. Olivia stood perfectly still, her notebook clutched to her chest, waiting for whatever impossible task her boss was about to request. When he finally blurted out his plan, asking her to pose as his wife for his cousin's destination wedding in Colorado, she nearly dropped her pen. The professional boundary she'd maintained for 2 years was about to be obliterated, and the worst part was how desperately she needed the bonus he offered. Her mother's medical bills wouldn't pay themselves. "It's just 3 days," James continued, his voice taking on that persuasive tone he used with difficult clients. "My family doesn't know about the divorce. I can't face telling them, not at someone else's wedding." He looked at her with those intense blue eyes that always made her feel transparent. "Please, Olivia. I wouldn't ask if I had any other option." She should have said no. Every instinct screamed this was inappropriate, unprofessional, and would end badly. Instead, she heard herself say, "I'll need to know everything about your ex-wife. And I want the agreement in writing." His relief was palpable, but neither of them realized they had just stepped onto a path that would change everything. The flight to Denver was tense with awkward silence. James buried himself in architectural drawings while Olivia memorized the dossier she'd created on his ex-wife. "Your mother's name is Eleanor, she collects vintage teacups, and she'll ask about grandchildren within 10 minutes of meeting me," Olivia recited, not looking up from her notes. James winced. "Make that 5 minutes. And my brother David will try to figure out if you're good enough for me." He finally set his work aside. "I'm sorry about this. About dragging you into my mess." The sincerity in his voice made her look up. For the first time, she saw past the successful, controlled architect to the man beneath, vulnerable and a little lost. "It's fine," she said, softer than intended. "Everyone has messes." The mountain resort took Olivia's breath away, rustic luxury nestled among towering pines with snow-capped peaks in the distance. Their arrival, however, gave her no time to appreciate the scenery. James. A whirlwind in designer clothes engulfed him in a hug. "And this must be the mysterious wife you've been hiding from us." Eleanor Whitfield's appraising gaze swept over Olivia from head to toe. James slipped his arm around Olivia's waist, pulling her close. "Mom, this is Olivia." The warmth of his hand through her blouse sent an unexpected shiver up her spine. She smiled brilliantly, channeling confidence she didn't feel. "I've heard so much about you, Eleanor. Your son speaks of you constantly." The older woman's eyebrows rose in surprise, and James squeezed Olivia's waist in silent approval. Dinner that evening was an interrogation disguised as a family gathering. "So how did you two meet?" James's brother David asked, his tone suggesting he already knew the answer wouldn't satisfy him. Before James could speak, Olivia placed her hand over his. "He interviewed me for the assistant position, but we kept it strictly professional for over a year." She smiled at James with practiced adoration. "Then one night we both worked late on the Westridge project. He ordered Thai food, and we ended up talking until midnight about everything except work." James stared at her, momentarily speechless. She'd created a story so plausible, so close to an actual night they'd shared, that for a second even he believed it. She spilled green curry on the blueprints, he added, recovering quickly. I knew then she was the one. The table erupted in laughter, and Olivia felt a strange pang. The lie had come too easily to them both. Later that night, they faced the awkwardness of sharing a suite. I'll take the sofa, James said immediately, grabbing a spare pillow. Olivia stood by the window, looking out at the moonlit mountains. Your family is nice. Intense, but nice. He laughed without humor. They're judgmental and meddling. You just haven't seen it yet. She turned to face him. Why did you really bring me here, James? You could have told them you were divorced. Or come alone. The question hung between them. Finally, he sighed. My ex-wife left because I was married to my work. My family warned me it would happen. I couldn't face their "I told you so" looks. The admission cost him, she could tell. We all have our armor, she said quietly. This is yours. The wedding rehearsal the next day thrust them deeper into their charade. James's hand rested comfortably on the small of her back as they mingled. He whispered commentary about relatives in her ear, his breath warm against her neck. They moved in sync, anticipating each other's needs from years of working together. You two are so in tune, the bride commented. How long have you been married? Olivia froze momentarily. 3 years, James answered smoothly. But we've known each other much longer. His eyes met Olivia's, and something unspoken passed between them. She realized with a start that they did know each other, perhaps better than either had acknowledged. The rehearsal dinner found them seated with James's college friends, all eager to meet the woman who had tamed the workaholic. Champagne flowed freely, loosening tongues and inhibitions. To be honest, we were shocked when James got married again, one friend said. After Rebecca, we thought he'd sworn off relationships forever. Olivia's practiced smile faltered. Again? James had never mentioned a previous marriage before his recent divorce. She felt his body tense beside her. Ancient history, he said dismissively, but his knuckles were white around his water glass. Later, when they danced to satisfy his mother's insistence, Olivia couldn't help asking. Who's Rebecca? His steps faltered. My first wife. She died. Car accident, 12 years ago. Back in their suite, the revelation hung heavy between them. I'm sorry, Olivia said, sitting on the edge of the bed. I didn't know. James stood by the window, his back to her. It's not in my personnel file. The bitterness in his voice made her flinch. Is that why you work so much? To avoid feeling? The words escaped before she could stop them. He turned, anger flashing in his eyes. You don't know me, Olivia. Not really. She stood, suddenly angry herself. I know you take your coffee black until noon, then switch to tea. I know you tap your pen 3 times before signing anything important. I know you donate anonymously to the Children's Hospital every month. She stepped closer. I know you're kind when no one's looking. I know you're lonely but won't admit it. His expression changed to something unreadable. We should get some sleep, he said finally. But neither of them slept much that night. The wedding day dawned clear and perfect. They moved around each other carefully, the previous night's tension still simmering. As they took their seats for the ceremony, Eleanor leaned over. You two had a fight. It wasn't a question. Olivia started to deny it, but James's mother patted her hand. Good. Real marriages have fights. I was beginning to think you were too perfect to be true. The knowing look in the older woman's eyes sent alarm through Olivia. As the bride walked down the aisle, James's hand found hers, squeezing gently. A peace offering. She squeezed back, and something shifted between them, an acknowledgement that their pretense had layers neither had anticipated. The reception was in full swing when disaster struck. James's phone rang, an emergency with their biggest project. "I need to make some calls," he said, already moving toward the exit. Olivia watched him go, recognizing the familiar pattern. Work was his escape, his priority. Always. Eleanor appeared at her side. "He's just like his father was. Work first, everything else second." She studied Olivia's face. "How do you handle it?" The question hit too close to home. In that moment, Olivia stopped playing a role and spoke from her heart. "I remind him what he's missing while he's gone. And I make sure what he comes back to is worth returning for." Eleanor's expression softened. "You really do love him, don't you?" Olivia looked across the room where James had reappeared, his face tense with work concerns. "Yes," she said quietly. "I think I do." James found her on the terrace later, watching couples dance through the windows. "Crisis averted," he said, loosening his tie. Olivia didn't turn. "Your mother thinks you work too much." He sighed. "She's probably right." The admission surprised her. "Why do you do it?" she asked. "Hide in your work?" He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. "After Rebecca died, I had nothing but work. Then with Melanie, my ex-wife." He trailed off. "Work doesn't leave. Work doesn't die or decide you're not enough." The vulnerability in his voice made her turn. "Is that what happened? Melanie thought you weren't enough?" His bitter laugh told her everything. "No. She was right, I gave her what was left after work took the best parts." The music changed to something slow and sweet. Without thinking, Olivia held out her hand. "Dance with me." He hesitated, then took it, pulling her close as they swayed under the stars. "You're good at this," he murmured. "Being my wife." She laughed softly. "I've had 2 years to study you. I probably know you better than she did." The words hung between them, too honest for comfort. His hand tightened on her waist. "Olivia." Whatever he meant to say was interrupted by the photographer, asking for one more shot of the happy couple. They posed, his arm around her, her head against his shoulder. The camera captured something neither was ready to acknowledge: the pretense had become dangerously real. The final morning arrived too quickly. As they packed in silence, James cleared his throat. "About your bonus. I'll have accounting process it tomorrow." The return to business talk felt jarring after the intimacy they'd shared. "Thank you," Olivia said stiffly. "I'm sure your family was convinced." He paused, watching her fold a dress. "Too convinced, maybe. My mother invited us for Christmas." The implications hung in the air. Their charade had an expiration date, the moment they returned to real life. "We'll need to tell them the truth eventually," she said, not meeting his eyes. "That we've separated? Divorced?" His voice held a question she couldn't answer. The drive to the airport was silent, both lost in thoughts of returning to their normal roles, boss and assistant, nothing more. At security, James suddenly stopped. "I don't want to go back to how things were." The words tumbled out, surprising them both. "This weekend, it wasn't all pretend for me." Olivia's heart raced. "James, we can't," he cut her off. "Why not? Give me one reason that isn't about work or what other people might think." She had a dozen reasons ready, all the logical arguments about workplace relationships and power dynamics. Instead, she found herself saying, "I'm scared." His expression softened. "So am I. But I'm more scared of going back to my empty life and pretending I don't feel this." 3 months later, James stood nervously in his living room, adjusting his tie. The doorbell rang, and he took a deep breath before answering. Olivia stood there, beautiful in a simple blue dress. "Ready?" she asked with a smile. He nodded, taking her hand. "As I'll ever be." As they drove to his mother's house for dinner, their first visit as an actual couple, James glanced at her. "No pretending this time." She squeezed his hand. "No pretending." What had begun as a deception had led them to the most honest thing either had known. Sometimes, they discovered, you have to wear someone else's life to find your own. We'd love to know, which country are you watching from? Drop a comment below. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you believe in second chances, show your support by hitting the like button. Subscribe to Eternal Love Diaries for more stories that touch the heart and change perspectives. From Denver, Colorado, United States, we thank you for joining us on this journey of discovery. Remember, sometimes the most beautiful truths emerge from the stories we think we're only pretending to tell. Until next time, keep your hearts open to the unexpected turns love may take in your own life.